Trump's former national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, explains how the Situation Room works in under 60 seconds.
The national security advisor needs to be the honest broker. And the cabinet secretaries are the constitutional officers that have the departments that have to implement the policy, that have the best information on what's going on. And they should brief the president and give their best advice. And the national security advisor should not try and put a thumb on the scale and influence their decisions. And so I would go ahead and tell everyone, we're going to have a meeting. Here's where the president's leaning right now. But we want your best advice, and here are the questions I've got. Here are the questions I think the president may ask. Here are the big concerns, but you all address it. And then usually the president would ask me at the end, Robert or Ambassador, what do you think?
All right, guys, good Friday to you. We've made it through the week, but if you've learned anything, it's that it really doesn't matter in Trump world because Saturday and Sunday are just equally work days. So we're probably going to see some activity over the weekend through him, through who knows. He is in Bedminster or on his way there. I'd have to look, but he's on his way to Bedminster. He'll be there this weekend, but I don't think that means that we're going to have a quiet weekend. There's a lot going on. I'm really excited about today's show. I'm so pumped. I hope you can sit back, relax, grab yourself a beverage of some sort as you ease your way into the weekend because Trump's former national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, is about to come up. And I wanted to have a conversation that I don't think, I know I haven't seen anywhere else. And the beautiful thing about my background is that unlike just a pundit that hosts a show or has an idea or an opinion, which I respect, this is the beauty thing of what we can tune into these days. Someone entertains you or you find informative, then listen to them. But I think one of the things that I bring that no one else does is an insight into the process. And I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with Robert O'Brien to explain when we say that Trump's sitting down with his national security counsel or advisors, who are they? How does the room look? Who makes the decision? How is the process flow? How did the decision get made? And I think Robert O'Brien, based on his experience as national security advisor, can bring us into the room, into the process like nobody else. Because remember, like John Bolton, who did serve in that position, he doesn't like Trump. He's never going to give you an honest assessment. H.R. McMaster, I don't think gets along too well with Trump anymore. Mike Flynn, he is out there, but he was there for 30 days. So I'm not, again, total respect to General Flynn for his service. But I think one of the things about O'Brien's 2 years as national security advisor is they can really bring us some insight into how those decisions are made. He still is in good contact with the president. So anyway, I'm going to get into this discussion and I hope you enjoy it and can share it with friends because no one else is doing this. And this is why I was excited about getting Robert O'Brien on the show. But there's a lot of other news. So before I get to Iran and the decision process, because as you saw, President Trump basically said, hey, I'm giving 2 weeks. But where everybody's missing this, and this is so like Trump, it's they're like, oh, so he's going to make a decision in 2 weeks. No, that's not what he said. He said, I'm going to, within 2 weeks. So it could be tomorrow that he launches a strike. It could be the last day of the 2 weeks. But everybody's focused on the time limit. I don't think that's what matters. He's ready to go, and he's trying to bring peace. Like, he is the only guy that's doing this. Everybody else wants him to drop a bomb and go to war. And Trump's like, I'm going to give these guys an opportunity to come back to the table to make sure that they understand that they can't have a nuclear bomb to threaten us or anyone else. But I don't want war. Like, he is like, that's why it's the America First MAGA movement. Getting results without just reflexively sending in a bunch of troops and starting a forever war. He's the only one that ever can do this kind of stuff because reflexively, everyone else is like, let's go fight, let's go get him. And I think based on what we've seen in history, that can be a very dangerous precedent. We get stuck in some long-term deal, regime change, etc. Now, I think this is, in my opinion, the ball is entirely in Iran's court. Entirely. If they want to have a deal, he's willing to sit down and deal with this. The planes are on the tarmac, baby, though. Like, he's made it clear, I can do this at any point. I can take you out. All of your facilities, capabilities out. But I'm giving you a chance to not have any of that occur, to live peacefully, not have regime change, which should be a bonus to the Ayatollah, if you guys actually take down your nuclear capabilities. Seems like a pretty fair deal to me. So he's given them some time. This is why over the weekend I'll be interested. Like the two things I'm looking for are the tweets from the Ayatollah. Does he ratchet it down? Because he keeps saying, we will never totally disarm. Okay, well then you're backing him into a corner, and I would never want to be doing that. Trump's not afraid to use force. He will do it, but that's not where he wants to. He doesn't. I've been in the room with him. He is always looking to make peace more than anything else. He doesn't want to see death and destruction. That's just not in his DNA. And he continues to show that. Iran, understand that, take advantage of it. Don't blow this moment. I'm going to get into this with Robert O'Brien, but there was some other big news this week that didn't get a lot of headlines that I want to make sure we cover. There were new numbers released on the quantity of illegal aliens released into the U.S. Okay, so that's the number of people that have come into the U.S. illegally, and we track that. So I'll just give you some context. Of May 2024, last year of Biden, well, kind of Obama, he's kind of running it. In May of 2024, in that last year of the Biden White House, 64,000 people were released into the country because they came to the border and presented, okay, whatever. That number 1 year later, zero. Not 10, not 13, not 42, zero. 100% decline. This is what leadership looks like. When President Trump said that he was going to shut the border, keep us safe, reduce illegal immigration, he meant it and he's showing it. Just think about this for a second. When Biden said he couldn't do it, that was a lie. They actively chose to do it. And the numbers speak for themselves. 64,000 a year ago, zero now. I mean, this is the difference. If you want to make this a priority, protecting the country, you can do it. Now, I do think we need it backed up by action from Congress. We need legislation. But to go from 64,000 to zero border crossings shows you that leadership matters. Priorities matter. If you want to keep the country safe, you can. So for all this talk about, our hands were tied, we couldn't do anything from the Biden administration, they were gaslighting us, they were lying to us. The press loves to throw around this word lying, constitutional crisis. That would seem to me both. You lied to us. You told us that you couldn't do anything, and we know you could. Number one. Number two is constitutionally your job is to protect this country, and you chose not to. This was President Obama, by the way, talking about this issue back when he was president about why he had to enforce the law. Take a look.
Last time we spoke, you said that you weren't king, you were president. There were only certain things you could do unilaterally. As time goes on, 1,000 deportations on average a day. People are wondering, and our Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds, that's the question everybody asks. Won't you at least consider unilaterally freezing deportations for the parents of deferred action kids?
Yeah. Here's the problem that I have, Jose, and I've said this consistently. My job in the executive branch is supposed to be to carry out the laws that are passed. Congress has said, here's the law when it comes to those who are undocumented, and they allocate a whole bunch of money for enforcement. And what I have been able to do is to make a legal argument that I think is absolutely right, which is that given the resources we have, we can't do everything that Congress has asked us to do. What we can do is then carve out the DREAM Act folks, saying young people who have basically grown up here are Americans that we should welcome. We're not going to have them operate under a cloud, under a shadow. But if we start broadening that, then essentially I would be ignoring the law in a way that I think would be very difficult to defend legally. So that's not an option. And I do get a little worried that advocates of immigration reform start losing heart and immediately thinking, well, somehow there's an out here. If Congress doesn't act, we'll just have the president sign something and that'll take care of it. And we won't have to worry about it.
You see that? Didn't age too well, did it? Republicans should be playing that clip on a loop. President Obama understood that's his job, to enforce the law. The commander-in-chief, that's what you do. Enforce the law. If you don't like it, you change it. You work with Congress, whatever, but you don't just get to ignore it. It's so funny how Trump's the bad guy in this. When Obama said it, no one had a problem, right? Because it makes sense. It's common sense. We have a law. Follow it. You don't like it? Say that. I'm fine with that. I don't like this particular law. I'm going to work with Congress to change it, to overturn it, whatever. But when you talk about constitutional crises and threats to America, just play that clip over and over again. That's what President Trump's doing. It's just that we didn't see it during the Biden administration because they ignored the law over and over again. So to actually see a president enforce the law and uphold it, it's such a shock to the left because they're like, oh my God, for 4 years, no one did this. Suddenly you guys want us to do this? Unbelievable. Another piece of great news before I get into my conversation with Robert O'Brien, by the way, the U.S. Navy, SecNav, John Phelan came out yesterday, announced that they have hit recruiting goals for the third month in a row. Congratulations to Secretary Phelan, the U.S. Navy. This follows in the wake of the U.S. Army. I know the media hates to give Trump credit, but he deserves some. He's got morale back on course. He's getting people excited about serving in the country. And I know that they won't admit it, but we all know the truth. A lot coming up next week, by the way. James O'Keefe, Dan Turrentine's going to be back, my friend, to talk about the strategy in the Democratic Party. And guys, I'm telling you, my hearing this week is the tip of the iceberg. There is no strategy in the Dem Party. I'm going to talk to Dan about that. And there's a gentleman by the name of David Zweig. He's a journalist. He wrote this book about COVID that is mind-blowing, and I'm going to break it down all for you. And then Victor Davis Hanson, I know a bunch of you have asked for him. He's on tap to come back on in a week or so. Before I get to Ambassador O'Brien to talk about the Iran decision-making process, I got to tell you, if you own a business or you are the person in charge of expenses or finances, get yourself one of these beauties. This is a Ramp card. Now, this is the physical one. When you sign up for Ramp, it's an expense software system. You get a physical card that's like a Visa. So this says Visa on one side, Vamp on the other. There are no numbers. I'm not that dumb. I'm not going to give you my Ramp card number and you'll go expensive. But if I did and you mistakenly got it, the beautiful thing about Ramp is that you can set expenses for everybody. Different employees, where they can shop, how much. You know, if you're this person, you know who I'm talking to. You're listening to me right now and you're like, I know who you are. I am that guy. I run around all day chasing receipts, collecting expense accounts, getting copies of stuff. No more. Ramp changes everything. It gives you back so much time to actually focus on what you should be doing, growing your business, all that kind of stuff. So many organizations. I had a guest on the show, I guess it's 3-4 months ago now. After the show, saw the ad for Ramp, switched over and said, you're not going to believe it. It was a small company. They got like 6-7 employees. He said, I went from chasing everyone down and doing all this stuff. Ramp, unbelievably, it gives you real-time visibility and control. It ensures that your books are already audit ready with automated workflows. They've got this white glove onboarding process. So it takes like 15-20 minutes. You hook up with some bank account information. It could not be easier. Over 25,000 businesses trust Ramp, including Shopify, Boys and Girls Club. They were just rated #1 in spend management by G2. And now for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 in your pocket. $250 just by joining Ramp. So you get to make some money and I get you a ton of your time back. Just go to ramp.com/Spicer, ramp.com/Spicer, and you will thank me for this. Whether you have 5 employees or 5,000, huge, huge game changer. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC, terms and conditions apply. All right, it's Friday. I'm about to bring on a great guest, but there's another great guy. You've heard me talk about him ad nauseum, Leo Grillo, the founder of Delta Rescue. Literally last night, I got another solicitation from Leo because I've personally given to him. So now I get hit up all the time on mail from Leo Grillo, but he's worth it because he started by rescuing one dog that he named Delta, dedication to everlasting love of animals, and then said, I can do a lot more. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you will see what I'm talking about. It has grown tremendously, and he is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary, not shelter, sanctuary, because they take care of abandoned, mistreated, abandoned animals, dog, cats, horses, you name it, for life. It's not a shelter. They're not looking to get them adopted or a new home. He takes in everything. It's so amazing what Leo Grillo is doing, and it relies entirely on people like me and you to make a contribution. I have done it. I have made a personal contribution at deltarescue.org, and I would ask you to go do the same exact thing because there's no big grants that Leo's tapping into from USAID. It's all his personal mission and dedication to animals that's doing this. Go to deltarescue.org, consider a contribution, look at that estate planning kit. If you can potentially think of an old 401k stock or something, talk to their tax professional. You may have a benefit. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in Trump's former national security advisor to break down the process for what's going on in Iran and how decisions are made. He is the chairman of American Global Strategies, Ambassador Robert O'Brien. Ambassador O'Brien, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your insight today.
Good to be with you, Sean.
So just let's zoom out for a second and just explain how we got here. It seems like we were talking about everything going on in LA and immigration, and suddenly we're talking about potential World War III. How did this all kind of come to be so quickly?
Well, Sean, your former boss and my former boss, President Trump, is putting on a masterclass in peace through strength diplomacy. And what he did is he went to the Iranians and he told them, look, you can have a great deal. You've got 60 days to accept. And as you know, President Trump is very transparent. No enrichment, no nuclear program, and we'll let you back into the world economy. You can get rich, your people can get rich, and he was willing to take the heat from people that didn't want Iran to be allowed back into the sanctions and allow them back into the economy. But to get the end of the enrichment, he was willing to do it. And unfortunately, the Iranians thought that they were dealing with Barack Obama or Joe Biden. They strung him along. They thought that they didn't get the memo that Donald Trump was in office. And when 60 days elapsed, look, we saw he in fact, I remember he told the Iranians, we can do it the easy way with you dismantling the enrichment program peacefully, or we can do it the hard way. Well, Bibi Netanyahu is showing on the hard way right now.
But that's what I'm getting at. Like, I think that President Trump was having this conversation with them. He felt very good about, or at least he projected that these conversations were moving in the right direction. And then Israel, from what we're told through reports, basically greenlit an attack on them, on Iran. And the question I'm asking you is sort of an expert in this field. Yeah. Did that set back this opportunity for peace, or was that the right move?
No, I think it was the right move because the Iranians have done this for 40 years, Sean. You remember they took our diplomats hostage back in 1979, held them for 444 days. They killed American Marines and airmen and soldiers at Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. They killed at least 600 of our men and women in Iraq with shaped explosive devices. So they've been coming after us for a long time, and they've gotten away with it at every turn. Donald Trump came into office in the first term, got us out of the JCPOA, which basically would have allowed Iran to become a legitimate nuclear power. He said that's not going to happen. Iran can never get a bomb. Yeah, he put maximum pressure on Iran. He had the operation against General Qasem Soleimani at the Baghdad airport and restored deterrence, and the Iranians knew he meant business. And then he left, and what happened? Joe Biden turned a blind eye to all the sanctions, took maximum pressure off the table, paid him $6 billion to release 3 hostages. Three weeks after Biden gave him the money, Hamas attacked Israel, took more hostages. No surprise, because they thought if Biden's willing to pay $6 billion for 3, how much will they pay for 200? And they use that money to fund their terrorist proxies. So when President Trump came back into power, the other thing is, Sean, keep in mind, they threatened to kill President Trump. They've got several videos on the internet with animated assassinations of President Trump. President Trump was a big enough guy to forgive him, or to say, look, bygones can be bygones. If we can get a deal, I'm not going to hold it against you personally, but you've got to give up the nuclear weapons. And Iran just thought that they could play him along, tap him in the negotiations. And so Trump gave him 60 days. When the 60 days were done, he washed his hands. He said, you're on your own. And Bibi Netanyahu, after having gone through October 7th and the Hamas-inspired, the Iranian-inspired attack of Hamas on Israel, that was just brutal. I mean, death and rapes and toddlers killed and parents killed in front of their kids and kids killed in front of their parents. The Israelis were ready to go, and they showed the Iranians, who was boss. And Iran is now suffering greatly, just as President Trump predicted they would if they didn't take his deal.
So that's what I don't like. The Obama regime gave them literally a pallet of cash. Biden tried to pay them off for hostages, as you point. I guess the overarching question that I can't. I mean, you mentioned it going all the way back to 1979. Yeah. I just have a hard time getting my head around the idea that you can ever make a deal with somebody like that, ever, under any circumstances. Because as you point out correctly, they continue to obfuscate over and over again. And under the original JCPOA that Biden signed, it was like they found ways around inspections and making sure that they upheld their part of the bargain. So I guess the broader question that I would ask you, especially with your background and expertise, is, was there ever a possibility of getting a deal with Iran that would have sort of prevented them from getting a nuke in a military sense?
You know, perhaps not, Sean, but I think what President Trump said is, I'm going to give you one final chance. But we're going to have to, he actually used the Reagan term, trust but verify. And we have to have any time, anywhere, no kidding inspections, not European IAEA inspections, not UN inspections, where we have to have American and Western European inspectors on the ground in Iran watching you, like literally disassemble the centrifuges, crate them up, put them in a pallet, and send them to Russia or wherever you want to send them. But they've got to be gone. And at the end of the day, I don't think the Iranians believed he was serious. I think they thought they could play him the way they played previous American presidents. And again, they've had 40 years of doing this, of no consequences. This time they've run into Donald Trump and they realized, you know what? The guy says what he means, and he means what he says. And he's the most transparent president, you know, as you know, having served him as press secretary, most transparent guy in the world. He tells you exactly what he's going to do. And he told the Iranians, look, I'm not putting a leash on being, you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu. If the 60 days, I'll keep them at bay for 60 days so we can try to do these negotiations. But if you don't take the deal and you want to play this game of being master negotiators and stringing us along, you know, the 60 days is up. Bibi, you know, and Bibi Netanyahu knows President Trump, as you know well, and has spent a lot of time with him over the years, even before he was president. And Bibi went to town on him on day 61, and then now the Iranians are learning what a peace or strength is. But I think in some ways, Sean, there's this fake media report that there's a split in MAGA. The Make America Great Again constituency for President Trump is somehow split over his decision to protect American interests and keep the Iranians from getting a bomb. President Trump has said from day one, when I was National Security Advisor, when Bolton was, when HR was, when Flynn was, Iran is never going to have a nuclear weapon. He's made that clear I think you probably said it from the podium yourself. Iran's not going to get a nuclear weapon. This is not new policy. And so for us to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon, when these are people that, number one, have threatened to kill the president and assassinate Trump and his family members and many of us in his administration, but also who chant death to America and have been doing so for 40 years. This is the most America first thing. To prevent those guys from getting a nuke that they could use against us is the most America first peace or strength policy I've ever seen. And so
you and I are on.
I don't think there's any split in MAGA that the press is trying to make up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, look, here's what I think you and I are on the same page on this. I think there's some voices on MAGA that want no intervention whatsoever, but I'm in the Robert O'Brien camp, which is if a potential adversary with nukes chanting death to America and you have the opportunity to take them out without sending boots on the ground, that's 100% America first. That's just smart too. But give me a sense of where, like, Trump has said, as you correctly point out, over and over and over again, they cannot have a nuke. The Ayatollah is making it very clear that we're not going to just give up, right? So what is a realistic outcome? Is it, hey, we're not going to have a choice, or that the Ayatollah will eventually back down, or somewhere in between?
Well, look, I think the Israelis are going to really take care of business. And look, there's the issue of Israel having the planes that can fly a bunker buster bomb big enough to take out the Fordo nuclear plant. And it's, you know, that last plant, that the facility that the Iranians have, is buried so deep that you really need one of those mother of all bombs, you know, to take it out conventionally. And that won't go on an F-15 or an F-35, which the Israelis are flying. So so people say, well, if they don't have the bombers, which we have, we can put one on a B-1 or B-2 or a B-52. If they don't have the bombers, how would they do it? What I've learned over the past year is Well, the time I served as national security advisor, never underestimate the Israelis. They'll figure out a way to get something done. I mean, I would never bet against them. So I think the Israelis probably have a plan to take out Frodo, and we'll that'll happen. But if the U.S. needs to get involved and take out that facility, I think President Trump is prepared to do so because look, it's just his comment was right on the money. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon because unlike the North Koreans, where Kim Jong Un wants to stay in power, regime survival is the most important thing to him. The Iranians want a nuclear weapon to destroy Israel, to kill their adversaries and to destroy us. They don't want a weapon for deterrence. They want a weapon to murder and slaughter and kill people. You can't let a regime like that get the weapon. And look, I think Netanyahu and Trump have both done something very smart. They've told the Iranian people, this is not about a war with the Iranian people. The Iranian people are great people. I'm from LA. They call it Tarangelis, in California. You go to the doctor, every doctor in the hospital is Iranian. I mean, they're smart people.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
A big Persian diaspora in Los Angeles. And look, I've got a lot of friends in the Persian community, Persian American community. Great people. The Iranians are smart. They've got a long history, long civilization. They've tried to rise up against this regime many times. I mean, the Green Revolution under Obama, when Obama sided with the mullahs against the people. In Biden's years, the same thing when the women with hijabs, rose up, and Biden sided with the mullahs against the women who didn't want to wear hijabs. So the people don't like this regime. President Trump has made it very clear that he loves the Iranian people. Netanyahu's done the same thing. So we might just get lucky here, Sean. I mean, I don't want to be overly optimistic, and regimes hang on to power, and especially regimes that are brutal and are willing to use force. But we may just get lucky and have regime change, not brought on by us, not by the Israelis putting troops in or America putting troops in, but the Iranian people themselves standing up and getting a new government. So that's what we can hope for.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you just said that I thought was fascinating because I hadn't heard this before. There's a narrative in the media that the only way that we can drop this buster bomb, breaking bomb, is with our air assets. Is it your belief? I just want to make sure I got you right, that there is a scenario that the Israelis could use their assets to carry our bomb. Is that did I hear you right?
No, look, I think their assets are probably too small to carry our bombs. They fly the F-15, they fly the F-35, which they bought from us, and they've modified them. They fly them well. Those planes probably aren't big enough to drop the bombs. But what the Israelis proved with an operation that they did in Syria a couple of years ago, they can put troops on the ground, take control of those bunkers, wire them, and blow them up. Now, that's a tough that's a tough thing to do, to put troops 1,500 miles away from their borders, and behind enemy lines, and have them blow up something as big as that facility. But again, I would not put it past the Israelis to do that.
But the bottom line, again, that's why I want to be clear on this, is that when you hear this narrative in the media that there's only two options, right? One is we do really nothing, or we drop this bomb, we the U.S. You're saying that there's a lot more potential possibilities. Don't just buy that narrative, because the Israelis are creative on other ways that they could achieve this mission. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And look, the easier way, you're right in this sense, and the mainstream media, legacy press is right to the extent. The easiest way to do it would be to have a B-52 or a B-2 fly overhead, drop what they call the mother of all bombs, an MOAB bomb, bunker buster, and take it out in one fell swoop. That would be technically the easiest way to do it. But look, we can do it other ways if we have to, and the Israelis can do it other ways if they have to.
So before I get to that scenario, just because I want to kind of get your take on this, there's sort of conflicting intelligence. 3 months ago, when testifying, DNI Tulsi Gabbard said that she didn't believe that the Iranian regime was working towards nor had a bomb. President Trump seemed to indicate that they were very close. Is there a reason that the intelligence is not more clear, or is it that it's just 3 months old with Tulsi? Like, why the discrepancy?
Well, look, Sean, you know this from your time in government and as a naval intelligence officer, that We get good SIGINT, signals intelligence. We get good electronic intelligence. But at the end of the day, that may get us to 95% or 98% of the intelligence that we need on some of these big questions. But to really know where the Iranians are, you need to have human intelligence. You need to have people in the inner circle with the Ayatollah knowing what the Ayatollah is ordering his Revolutionary Guard commanders to do, knowing what the scientists are doing. And that's very tough to pull off, even for the Israelis. Now, one thing we did have is, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the Israelis, in a very daring intel operation, went in and stole the Iranian nuclear archives. And what we found from those archives, they made it back to Israel, is that the Iranians were very close to getting a bomb, had a massive, supply chain. I mean, this isn't just one place. They have a supply chain, on this project going across their whole country. So it's a major operation. They're very close. But again, the real question that you asked, I think that Tulsi and her folks have to evaluate, and the IC has to evaluate, is what's the intent of the Iranians, and the problem with that is we're guessing. And look, if I was in the decision making process, which I'm not, I'm a private citizen now, and held the president on the Intelligence Advisory Board, but other than that, I'm not there day to day making these calls. But I have to look at what have the Iranians said, Sean, over the past 40 years. From day one, it's been death to America. And what have they done? They've obfuscated, they've lied about their nuclear program and said they're not racing towards a bomb when in fact they were. So when you get the reports that they're 3 days or 3 weeks away from a bomb, and you're Benjamin Netanyahu, you've got to think, if they get that bomb, they may just use it. And what we've seen from the past several days with these rocket attacks, they haven't been able to, the ballistic missile attacks from Iran to Israel, they haven't been particularly effective in hitting strategic assets or air bases, but they've hit neighborhoods. Now imagine if one of those weapons got through, one of the missiles got through with a nuke on it, that could be the end of Israel. With one Israel is so small, it could be one or two bombs could be the end of the whole country. So I don't think they can guess and hope for the best. I mean, I just don't think hope is a strategy when you're dealing with Iran.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I agree with you. You only have to be right once if you're the enemy. I think one of the things that I hear a lot, though, is that there's a lot of people who have WMD in the back of their minds and saying, well, we went down this path before. Saddam told us that he had all this. We went down this hole, and guess what? And we don't want to have it happen again. So where's that line between being smart when you with your background as the national security advisor, and you go to the president and he says, Ambassador, I got to worry that I don't take the country down this hole again. How do you tell him, hey, this intelligence outweighs this other intelligence? You mentioned human intelligence, signal intelligence, but at some point, that's your job as the national security advisor to recommend something to the president for him to ultimately decide on. When you're in a position like that, walk me through that, because you got to remember, I mean, a lot of Americans are sitting back going, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. Or I got it backwards. It's very George Bush.
No. Hey, I was one of those people who got fooled the first time. And I remember as far back as 1996, when I was working the post Iraq War, the post first Gulf War issues with the UN in Geneva as a lawyer. Everyone, the Russians, Chinese, everyone thought Saddam had WMD. Now it turned out he didn't, and he was just basically bluffing the Iranians, because he knew the Iranians. The one thing Saddam knew is he knew the Iranians were working on a nuclear weapon. He wanted to let the Iranians think that he was as far along as they were. But the difference between Tenet coming in and telling President Trump it's slam dunk that there's WMD, and us all making that mistake. Here we've got the entire nuclear archives from the Iranians captured from the Iranians, brought back to Israel, and we've got the inspectors. We've seen pictures of the centrifuges spinning. We've had neutral inspectors telling us that the Iranians are enriching at a very high level. They've seen the uranium. So this is with Saddam was always a myth, right? There were mobile labs. It was quite. it had to be somewhere. We know he's got it. It had to be somewhere. Here, we know they've got it. It's just, are they going to use it to turn it into a bomb? And so it's a little bit of a different question. But going back to the idea of boots on the ground, look, one thing I can tell you, President Trump wanted our troops out of Afghanistan. He wanted our troops out of Syria. He wanted our troops out of Iraq. From day one, you were probably hearing that when I was over at the State Department as a hostage envoy. You were in the White House probably hearing that every day. He wanted our troops out of those places, and he still does. He does not want American troops in the Middle East. And I'll tell you that the toughest days that I had on the job were accompanying the president or representing the president up at Dover Air Base for the dignified transfer of our fallen heroes. Those are really tough days, Sean, trying to go up and comfort the families and receive our heroes and give them the welcome that they deserved, coming out of the back of the airplane, which their families, couldn't believe was happening. And it was tragic and heartbreaking. And I think that had a real effect on the president. So the last person who wants to be, and look, I can always recommend, military action. And I can tell the president, look, blame it on me if it doesn't go right. But what he always looked at me and said, yeah, I'm not blaming it on you, Robert, Ambassador, because I'm the one making the decision. I'm the one making the order. And if we lose an American because of this operation, it's because of my order, not you or anybody else. And he had a keen awareness of his role as commander in chief, and he did not want to see Americans either injured at Walter Reed, where he would go pin on the Purple Hearts on him, and I think you accompanied him on some of those visits, or going to Dover for the transfer of the remains, because those are horrific things to have to do as a president. So he's very reticent about using American troops. But the one thing he will do is if there's a foreign adversary, whether it's a terrorist group, a non-state actor like ISIS, or a Qasem Soleimani, or a bad actor that's a country, Russian mercenaries trying to overrun one of our foreign operating bases in Syria. If there's a foreign adversary that's going to try and injure American servicemen and women or the American people in the homeland, President Trump will not hesitate to take action. And he's shown that. But again, I don't think he's not a fan of nation building. He's not going to put troops on the ground in Tehran, try and turn Tehran into a democracy. But if he thinks that they've got a weapons or the ability to build a weapon to hurt us, especially here in the homeland, he's going to take that out and to protect us.
Yeah, I think the way you just described that is so important for people to understand. I saw it from my perspective, but you more than anybody saw it over and over again. President does not want foreign American boots on foreign soil, and he will do anything at the same time to protect Americans. Yeah. And I think that people don't fully appreciate that dynamic. But I want you have this ability right now to bring us inside the room in a way that nobody else can. So the president flies home from the G7 this weekend. He says, hey, I got to go to the sit room. I want my NSC team in there. Walk us through just for a second. Like, what does that look like? Who's in the room? What are those discussions? Is it one discussion? Is it, hey, we'll meet 5 times? What are you guys doing behind the scenes? So like when he says that, if you were the NSA at the time, and you were either traveling with him, which I assume you would have been, what is it that the National Security Advisor is doing right now to coordinate that? Is it constant meetings in the sit room? Is it one-offs and then big ones here? Like, just give the audience a flavor of what's happening from a National Security Council standpoint in these days since he returned from the G7.
So first of all, that's a great question, Sean. And first of all, when the president goes to the sit room, and you know this is a big deal, because he does most of his business in the Oval Office or in the library behind the Oval Office. He goes to the Situation Room when it's a Baghdadi situation, or when it's a Soleimani situation, or we know there's going to be an attack on us by the Iranians, which happened, the missile attacks after Soleimani. He doesn't go to the Situation Room very often. So when he goes, it's a big deal. And if I was on the plane on Air Force One with him, I'd be calling the cabinet secretaries, and because when the president meets in the Situation Room, it's the cabinet secretaries are there. It's not deputies, it's not assistant secretaries or undersecretaries. It's Hagstead and Rubio and Lutnick and Bassett. I mean, the whole National Security Council of Principals is convened. The president sits at the head of the table. The vice president sits on one hand. The Secretary of State sits on the other. And the NSC sits next to the vice president. The National Security Advisor representing the NSC sits next to the vice president, and then the SecDef sits next to the Secretary of State. and you've got the national security leadership sitting around a table in what's called in a conference room. It's called the JFK, John F. Kennedy conference room, named after that sit room was set up for the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it's named after him. So you think of the history. This conference room has seen it all from the Cuban Missile Crisis on, and the president is going to make big decisions. And when you've got the decider there, everyone will have their say about what they think the policy should be. The CIA director, then the DNI will probably make the initial briefing. One of the two of them will kind of set the groundwork, and then the president goes around the table and asks everyone their opinion and their counsel, and he listens to it. He asks questions. President Trump is very involved in those briefings when he's heading at the head of the table, and then he'll make a decision. And then he'll say, okay, here's what we're doing, and then he'll usually offer everyone a chance, if there's anyone who really objects or really feels strongly about an issue, to make their case one more time. And once that's done, he makes a decision, and then the American military goes to work and takes care of business for us.
So before that meeting with the president, is the national security advisor pre-meeting with everybody saying, guys, here's what I think the president needs to do. Here's what the national security advisor, is going to recommend. Where do you guys come down on this? Do you agree with me? Do you dissent? Do you guys huddle before he comes down to give him a consensus idea? Or when he walks in the room, is it everybody's just going from there?
Well, that's a good question. So there are various models. So the model I had was what was called the Scowcroft model, named after Brett Scowcroft, General Scowcroft, who served as National Security Advisor under Ford and H.W., the first Bush. And General Scowcroft took the position that the National Security Advisor needs to be the honest broker. And the cabinet secretaries are the constitutional officers that have the departments that are going to have to implement the policy, that have the best information on what's going on. And they should brief the president and give their best advice. And the National Security Advisor should not try and put a thumb on the scale and influence their decisions. And so I would go ahead and tell everyone, we're going to have a meeting. Here's where the president's leaning right now, but we want your best advice. And here are the questions I've got. Here are the questions I think the president may ask. Here are the big concerns, but you all address it. And then usually the president would ask me at the end, Robert or Ambassador, what do you think? And I preferred when he did that in private after everyone spoke, because I didn't want the cabinet members to feel like they couldn't talk to me and confide me because I had a set position. Now they may have intuited that I was leaning one way or the other, but I always felt it was the president's decision to make, and that as a staffer, and an important staffer, but as a staffer to the president, I was totally subordinate to him. Whatever the president wanted to do, that's what we were going to do. That's the policy we were going to implement. And I think that's one reason why we had some success as a team with the president, myself, and he never fired me, which was good of him. And because I think he understood that he understood that I know he was elected by the American people,
right. And
I wasn't there to institute Robert O'Brien's policy. I was there to institute Donald Trump's policy. So that's kind of how you set it up. And oftentimes we would meet if the president didn't want to come to the Oval or come to the Situation Room and leave the Oval, because Sean, you'll appreciate this. When he leaves the Oval, even for an internal movement in the White House, everybody flocks out of their office. They all gophering up out of the cubicles. Everyone, the Navy mess, the restaurant, the snack bar is right next to the Situation Room. So everyone in line there is waiting to see the president. People want to get pictures. They want to say, hey, pitch them on our latest idea. or they go call their boss and say, hey, the president just went in the Situation Room, and it was, Pence, O'Brien, and Pompeo, and, Chris Miller. You should get your principal in there right away you should get in there right away to find out what's happening. And it's pretty much chaos. So oftentimes I would meet with the cabinet secretaries in the Situation Room, hear everyone's position. If we could reach a consensus, we'd take that consensus up with one or two secretaries, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, maybe the Chairman of Joint Chiefs, tell the president what the consensus of the cabinet was, and trust me, President Trump that was not the end of the story, because as you know, he's got his own way of thinking, and so whatever consensus we came up with, he may have a totally different view of the issue. And again, he was a person elected, so sometimes we get sent back with his views, and we come up with a new consensus. If we couldn't reach consensus and there were two sides to the issue, I asked that the cabinet secretaries to appoint one person for each side. We go up to the Oval Office. I try and be the referee a little bit, but once we're in the Oval Office, the president was like the judge. It's sitting at the resolute desk. He'd hear from one side and hear from the other, give them both a hard time, and encourage a real clash of ideas, because that's how he got his information, was often through a clash of opinions, and then he'd make a decision. And once we had the decision, we'd send them down. And my job was to make sure that the dissenting cabinet members, or if people weren't on board, that everyone knew very clearly what the president had ordered, and we put together a cabinet memo or an order from the president, and send it out in writing, so that everyone knew what the decision was, that there was no confusion about the order. And kind of like when you're writing orders to your subordinates in the Navy, putting out a written order so everyone knows the commander's intent.
Yep.
And then our job was to make sure that the deep state didn't try and thwart whatever the president had decided. And that was often the toughest part of the job.
Sir, I gotta let you go, but I gotta just one quick question, because it's on the mind of a lot of people. If we were to take out these nuke sites, does that necessarily, can we avoid sending troops after that? Meaning, there's a lot of people who are saying, once we bomb, we're all in. I don't get that sense. Do you share that view that doesn't necessarily mean we're all in?
No, look, I happen to know Colin Powell and not well, but I spent some time with him. And Colin Powell had that rule, the Pottery Barn rule, that if you break it, you own it. And with all due respect to General Powell, who was a great American, look, I don't think that's the rule. I don't think that's President Trump's rule. It's like, they built it. If we have to break it, we'll break it. But we don't own it. We don't have to go fix it. We don't have to go rebuild Iran afterwards. I mean, the British kept the empire going for 200 years with punitive expeditions. That if someone crossed the British or violated their national interest or killed a British ambassador or took British hostages, they'd send a brigade of troops in. They'd take care of business, and then they'd withdraw. Yeah. So this idea that we have to go in because there's a threat to the U.S. national interest and stay and turn Afghanistan into Sweden or turn Iraq into Norway, that's just first of all, it was never going to happen. It was we had high hopes. It was America had everyone's best interests at heart, but that was never going to work. I think President Trump, if you watched his first term very effectively, he kept us out of wars, but he punished our adversaries very severely when they threatened American interests. And I think that's what we would do here. But the President Trump is not sending boots on the ground in Iran, whatever we do.
I agree. Ambassador O'Brien, I really appreciate your insight. No one else can bring the level of insight and understanding of the decision-making process other than you at this critical moment. So thank you for being so generous with your time, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. You're a great American. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks, sir. All right, guys, great show. What insight that Ambassador O'Brien hit. And I'm going to tell you, nowhere else would you see that. A brand new column, by the way, tonight is at SeanSpicer.com. You're going to want to see big takeaways from my hearing this week. A lot of great, cool stuff. So go to SeanSpicer.com. We got a great week headed your way next week. Please share the show with 5 friends. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.